Did you know that prescriptions for GLP-1 drugs like Ozempic, semaglutide, and Rybelsus have surged in the last 5 years? In fact, according to a Fair Health report, although these medications were originally developed to treat diabetes, prescriptions for GLP-1s to treat excessive weight or obesity rose 587% between 2019 and 2024. What's even more stunning is this. The number of adults prescribed a GLP-1 without type 2 diabetes jumped nearly 2,000% during that same time. Clearly, something major is happening here. And in this video, we're going to explore exactly why. Hi, I'm Caitlin. Thanks for joining me here at Knowledge Not Noise, where I make sense of complicated health and wealth topics and share them as clear, helpful insights. So for my very first video, I'm going to dig into a subject that's not only dominating headlines, but it's also fundamentally transforming how doctors treat both diabetes and obesity, and that's GLP-1 drugs. You may know them by their brand names like Wegovy, Ozempic, or Mounjaro. But today we're going to go deeper. We're going to focus specifically on how these medications work for weight loss. Things like why they're so effective, what trade-offs come with them, and how they're quietly reshaping the way we think about food, willpower, and the science of weight itself. Oh, but first, before we jump in, if you like learning things that are practical and useful, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button, and you'll get notified every time I post something new. So to provide a high-level understanding of GLP-1s, I'm going to break down this topic into 4 sections. First, we're going to start with a quick snapshot of what GLP medications actually are. So how they work inside the body and how they were originally developed. Secondly, we'll move into current and future medical applications, meaning what are these drugs officially approved to treat today and what are researchers exploring for tomorrow. Thirdly, we're going to get into the fine print a little. Things like why the exact same drug might go by multiple names and what that means for cost and insurance coverage. And I'm also going to briefly discuss potential side effects. And finally, we're going to be looking ahead as to how these medications are changing not just bodies, but behaviors, and also food preferences, as well as the entire conversation around weight and health. Let's start at the foundation. What exactly are GLP-1s, and why are they making such a big impact? To begin, GLP-1 stands for glucagon-like peptide 1, a hormone your body already produces in the gut after eating. Its main jobs are to help regulate blood sugar, appetite, and digestion. GLP-1 medications are designed to mimic this natural hormone, but with longer-lasting effects. They increase insulin secretion, which helps lower blood sugar after meals. And of course, this makes sense in terms of being first used to treat patients with diabetes. Interestingly, they also slow down digestion, delaying how quickly food leaves the stomach, and they signal the brain to increase feelings of fullness after eating. As you can see in the diagram to the right, these effects ripple across the entire body, influencing the brain, stomach, pancreas, and more. And importantly, these drugs don't work by speeding up metabolism or directly burning fat. Instead, they change how your body responds to food, biologically and behaviorally, which is why they're producing such significant results. Beyond their beneficial impact for patients with diabetes, in clinical studies, GLP-1 medications have helped people lose between 5 and 15% of their body weight, depending on the brand and dosage. That's a dramatic shift, not just in weight, but how we understand and treat obesity. Let's zoom out for a moment and look at the bigger picture, because the story of GLP-1s has been decades in the making. GLP-1, or glucagon-like peptide 1, was first identified in 1980 by researchers studying how the gut communicates with the pancreas to regulate blood sugar. Scientists realized that this hormone triggered the release of insulin in response to food, a discovery that opened the door to treating type 2 diabetes in a more targeted way. But turning that discovery into a viable drug took time. GLP-1 is naturally broken down in the body in just 1 to 2 minutes, so pharmaceutical companies had to figure out how to develop a version that lasted longer, one that could stay in the bloodstream long enough to make a clinical impact. That's what eventually led to the first GLP-1 drug, exenatide, also known as Byetta, which was approved in 2005 for diabetes. Even then, though, these drugs didn't skyrocket in popularity right away. For years, they were largely seen as niche diabetes treatments and required twice daily or weekly injections. Most people, including doctors, didn't yet recognize their full potential, especially for weight loss. From there, development began to accelerate. In 2014, Saxenda became the first GLP-1 medication approved specifically for obesity. Then, in 2017, Ozempic hit the market as a next-generation GLP-1 for type 2 diabetes, offering stronger effects and a more convenient once-weekly injection. But the real cultural shift happened in 2021, when that same semaglutide compound was approved under a different name, Wegovy, for weight loss. At its full weekly dosage, Wegovy produced 15% average weight loss, sparking a national conversation about the potential of these medications to treat obesity directly, not just diabetes. Then came the heavyweight, Mounjaro, or tirzepatide, in 2022. It is a dual GIP-GLP-1 receptor agonist that activates 2 different gut hormones at once. The weight loss version, Zepbound, uses larger weekly doses and showed clinical trial results averaging 21 to 22% body weight loss, more than any prior GLP-1 drug. That kind of outcome turned heads, not just in doctors' offices and media headlines, but across the entire pharmaceutical industry. Perhaps most fascinatingly, the future of GLP-1s is shaping up to be much bigger than just diabetes and weight loss. Several versions, like Ozempic, Wegovy, and Mounjaro, have already been approved by the FDA to reduce cardiovascular risk in patients with type 2 diabetes and heart disease. That means their clinical value goes beyond blood sugar and body weight. They're being recognized for broader, long-term health protection. And that's just the start. Researchers are actively exploring how GLP-1s might treat other complex chronic conditions, including Alzheimer's disease, PCOS, sleep apnea, and even addiction. Early studies suggest these drugs may help reduce inflammation, regulate hormones, and change how the brain responds to reward and craving, which opens up new possibilities for mental health and metabolic health. So while most people know these as weight loss drugs, their impact could end up being far more wide-reaching. As we continue unpacking how GLP-1 medications support weight loss, this part of the story is both crucial and often underestimated. These drugs don't just change how much people eat, they change how people relate to food. GLP-1s interact with the brain's reward system, the same pathways that drive cravings, emotional eating, and the constant mental chatter around food. For many patients, it's like the noise suddenly goes quiet. They describe a calm they've never felt before. Not willpower, not restriction, just a genuine loss of interest in the foods they used to obsess over. It's not simply about cutting calories. It's about disrupting the entire psychological loop that fuels overeating. And for a growing number of people, that's what makes long-term weight loss finally feel possible. We'll explore more of what this shift means for how we understand health and self-control a little later in the video. Another fascinating and often unexpected effect of GLP-1 medications is the way they seem to shift what people want to eat. It's not just about feeling less hungry overall. Many patients describe a dramatic change in their food preferences. Where they once craved chips, candy, or fast food, they now find themselves reaching for fruits, vegetables, and lean proteins. Some even say they can taste and appreciate certain healthy foods for the first time in their lives. The science behind this is still developing, but the leading theory is that by dampening the brain's dopamine-driven reward response to hyperpalatable foods, GLP-1s make processed snacks feel less irresistible. Without that intense feedback loop, natural, whole foods can start to shine again, both in flavor and how they make people feel. It's not a forced change, it's a recalibration of desire. And that's part of what makes these medications so powerful for long-term lifestyle shifts. Next, I'd like to talk about one of the most confusing parts of this whole topic, the brand names. You've probably heard of Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, or Zepbound. But here's the twist. Ozempic and Wegovy are actually the same drug, semaglutide. And Mounjaro and Zepbound, also the same, tirzepatide. So why the different names? It comes down to the condition they're approved to treat. When semaglutide is prescribed for type 2 diabetes, it's sold as Ozempic. But when it's prescribed for weight loss, it's called Wegovy. The same goes for tirzepatide. Mounjaro is the diabetes version. Zepbound is the weight loss version. Sometimes the dosage differs, but more often it's the indication that matters. And that changes everything from the branding to your insurance coverage. So if you're wondering why your doctor might recommend one over the other, or why your insurance only covers Ozempic but not Wegovy, this is why. The name isn't just a label. It's a signal to the pharmacy, the prescriber, and the insurer about what this drug is being used for. Now, let's talk about cost, because for many, this is where things get complicated. GLP-1s like Ozempic, Wegovy, and Mounjaro typically cost over $1,000 a month without insurance. But coverage depends on why you're taking them. If you've been prescribed one of these drugs for type 2 diabetes, you're in better shape. Roughly 3/4 of employer insurance plans and over 80% of ACA marketplace plans cover them for that purpose. But if you're using them specifically for weight loss, it's a very different story. Fewer than 30% of employer plans cover obesity treatment with GLP-1s, and on ACA plans, coverage for Wegovy is almost non-existent, less than 1%. So while these medications are reshaping healthcare, the ability to access them still depends heavily on what your insurance considers a medically necessary reason. So if you've heard about these drugs, know someone who's taking them, or even interested for yourself, a key question to ask is, are there any side effects that I should be aware of? The answer is that as effective as these drugs can be, they're not without trade-offs. The most common complaints are gastrointestinal, symptoms like nausea, diarrhea, reflux, and constipation, especially in the first few weeks. Fatigue and muscle loss are also common, particularly in people who lose weight quickly without adequate protein or resistance training. Then there's what some have nicknamed Ozempic face, and this is the loss of volume and elasticity in the face as body fat decreases. And while rare, more serious risks include pancreatitis and gallbladder issues, which is why GLP-1s aren't recommended for everyone. So understanding the risks doesn't mean avoiding the drugs entirely, but it does mean weighing the benefits against the side effects, especially for long-term use. As we've seen, GLP-1 medications don't just reshape bodies, they're reshaping the way we think about food, weight, and willpower. For decades, appetite and overeating were treated as failures of discipline, something you could fix with enough motivation or the right meal plan. But these drugs point to a more complex biological reality. They reveal that appetite isn't just about habit or choice. It's driven by powerful hormonal and neurological systems that influence how hungry we feel how full we get, and even what foods we crave. And that raises bigger questions. If obesity is biologically mediated, should we treat it differently? How do we talk about willpower in a world where food behavior can be pharmaceutically altered? What happens to the cultural narrative of weight loss, or to the industries built on the idea that it's all about effort? GLP-1s aren't just medical tools, they're cultural disruptors, and we're only beginning to understand the full impact that they may have, not just on health, but on how we define success, self-control, and what it means to change. This isn't just about weight loss, it's about how we understand appetite, addiction, and our relationship with food. That's a wrap. Thanks for watching this explainer from Knowledge Not Noise, where we break down complex health and wealth topics into clear, useful insights. I hope this gave you a grounded understanding of GLP-1 medications and the big ripple effects they're having on medicine, behavior, and culture. So if you found this helpful, please go ahead and hit like and subscribe. That way you won't miss out on what's coming next, including my upcoming videos on the difference between mental fatigue and burnout and what it actually means to be financially healthy. So more clarity, less confusion, and that's the goal here. Knowledge, not noise. See you next time.